much money do family members have to pay in order to support someone who's been convicted of a crime and imprisoned as a result of that? Well, recently there was a study looking into the costs of having an imprisoned family member. And some of the costs are so outrageous that families have to either refinance their homes or take out huge loans in order to make ends meet. Now, according to this study that was reported by Think Progress, more than 2/3 of respondents said that their family's financial stability was damaged when a member was incarcerated. 2 out of 3 families had trouble meeting basic needs thanks to their loved one's conviction and incarceration, including half who struggled to afford food and another 48% who had trouble paying for housing. Now, I should note that this was a study done by Forward Together, the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and also the Research Action Design.
As I look at this story, there's a lot of really interesting things that come out of it. Number one, the reverberating consequences and costs of our penal system overall. And we incarcerate more per capita than any other country. And we do it oftentimes for ridiculous reasons, including the war on drugs, which feeds so much of our prison population. So it's not just the cost the war on drugs has, it's the cost of imprisoning people. But it's not just the cost of imprisoning people, as this study shows you. That then affects their family throughout in at least 4 substantial ways.
Absolutely. So let me tell you exactly how it impacts them. So the average debt they incurred for court fees and fines alone is an average about $13,607, which would eat up nearly all of the $16,000 annual income earned by a family of 2 living at the poverty line. Now, keep in mind that those convicted of crimes and incarcerated are more likely to come from a lower socioeconomic status. So,
because if you're rich, you're probably going to get away with it.
You're either going to get away with it or...
No, you have the resource to be, kidding aside, you have the resource to be able to hire a significant attorney or legal team. Yes, that would increase your percentages of being acquitted, right? Yes. But you can also bear that cost and have it not destroy your standard of living, right? Whereas even if you're not at the poverty line, $13,607 is a ton of money for almost any family in America that's not, forget the poor, also middle class. That's the devastating consequences. Oftentimes you got to take out loans, you got to get another job to be able to do that. And that's just the first leg. Right.
Now also, keep in mind, John Oliver did a really great segment on this. He was talking about what a joke public defenders have become. Not the defenders themselves, but the whole notion of them, because they're so underpaid and they're so overworked that oftentimes they're not as reliable as what a rich person can do with his money, right? A rich person can hire a great attorney who would actually not be overworked, would actually fight for them and get them off on certain crimes. Public defenders, unfortunately, don't have the same resources as other attorneys. When you look at how much money they make, it's crazy. These people went to law school, they went through all the hard work, and a lot of them worked their way up to like $40,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, look, for a lot of colleges now, for a lot of law schools, that's 1 year of law school. I mean, you go to law school for 3 years, you're going to be saddled with all this debt, and then you're going to become a public defender, not be able to pay it off. And also, public defenders are incentivized to settle. Plea. Just by the nature of their job, let alone in some areas where they're literally financially incentivized.
Exactly.
So, you really want to be at the hands of someone who has all the incentive in the world, as good an intention as they might have, to make sure you say, yes, I'm guilty of something, even if you didn't do it.
I know, it's crazy. So to cover the cost of conviction, 20% of families took out a loan while 9% had their wages garnished or tax refunds withheld to make payments. More than 1/3 had to go into debt to pay for phone calls and visits alone. Now keep in mind, the phone calls cost an insane amount of money. A lot of phone companies will charge a ton of money, like let's say $4 a minute, right? Which families can't afford. That's a lot of money. And then on top of that, inmates will usually collect calls in order to communicate with their family members, and that's also very expensive. And in terms of visits, a lot of these prisons are 4 hours away if you're lucky, and so you have to pay a lot of money in terms of gas just to get there. Also, let me give you some more information about this. About half of the family members experience negative health impacts related to the incarceration of their loved one, including post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, nightmares, and hopelessness. So then you got to deal with some medical costs as well. 20% missed or lost employment opportunities when trying to support an incarcerated family member. 10% of the respondents said young members of the family couldn't attend high school or go to college. Now, some people might look at this and say, well, tough nuggets, right? This person was convicted of a crime, they were imprisoned, and this is just what happens. But also keep in mind that we have this justice system that goes after low-level, non-violent offenders, right? People who are caught with possession of drugs. And so you get caught with some marijuana and all of a sudden you're incarcerated as a result of that, and that has a ripple effect on your entire family. Now people are dealing with, health costs that are related to your incarceration. They're taking out loans, they're going into debt. It's a disaster.
So 4 layers here to summarize. The trial costs you a ton of money. The person going to prison causes that family to lose income because he's not bringing in income anymore. And about half the prisoners used to make at least half of the income for their family. So that's a huge, heavy blow to deal with. Third of all, you've got the visitation rights and the phone bill that Anna's talking about. The averages are normally you get charged about 4 cents if you're in the outside world, right, per minute. In prison, the average is $1.22. Look at this scale difference, 4 cents, $1.22, right? So that, and then the families have to pay that. Driving all the way, all these different costs that are involved. And then finally, not only the health effects that Anna mentioned, but in order to drive 4 hours each way to a prison, sometimes you got to take a day off from work, more lost income, right? And it piles on and on and on. So again, the guy's a murderer or a rapist, you don't shed a tear, I'm right there with you, right? And so that's that he shouldn't have done that and put those costs on his own family, right? On the other hand, if we're unjustly imprisoning hundreds of thousands of perhaps millions of people, just like we did in the past, if we're having a beer in the past and now if we're having a joint, right? And you add all those costs onto the burden of society, then you go, wait a minute, what are we doing to ourselves? Why are we doing this? So understand the full ramifications and the full costs of this silly, silly war on drugs.